Hey everyone, Carl here with Littleroot Lessons, bringing you a deep dive featuring Reshiram this week. Reshiram is a very powerful restricted that we haven't seen a whole lot of in Series 10, but was once very, very popular in Series 8, and is probably going to be the same story for Series 11. But before we get into covering Reshiram here, make sure to hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications for when new videos go live. You can go check out our new merch store at lrlessons.com. We've got t-shirts and mugs and stickers up there. It's super duper cool, and we're super excited to start that process, so definitely go check it out and you can help us support us there. Make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, where we're doing deep dive choice polls on Fridays. This Friday will be Charizard, and then there'll be a new poll up and you can vote on that. So, Reshiram. Reshiram is a very powerful restricted option in the terms of just like overall use, boasting some of the best coverage, and I would call one of the best typings for restricted Pokemon in general. Fire Dragon is actually a very powerful restricted typing, mainly due to the fact that you're only weak to Dragon, Fire, and Ground, Dragon, Rock, and Ground, and you lose that Fairy weakness that dragons so typically have. Think things like Palkia or Giratina. Other really good, like really bulky Dynamax dragons are all weak to Fairy, which is a common type right now. But Reshiram being Fire Dragon and Dialga to some extent being Steel Dragon are really good dual typings because they lose a lot of those extra weaknesses. Not to mention all of his great coverage. One of the best moves on Reshiram most of the time you'll see later on is Earth Power. That is probably the most common move on Reshiram, if I remember correctly, mainly giving you access to max quakes, which help boost your special defense, which make you even bulkier and just kind of snowball the game out of control. And with Dynamax returning to Series 11, Reshiram is going to be an extremely strong option for those looking for a restricted build around for Dynamax. You get access to fire moves and dragon coverage, and you get access to some to Earth Power and some other random coverage moves in there, Shadow Ball and things like that. So it'll be a very powerful option in Series 11 as a Dynamax target, and a real good build around restricted. Its history in the metagame for Sword and Shield has kind of been fleeting. It didn't see a ton of play in Series 8, roughly about 2% by it was all said and done. But it was really good earlier on in the meta, being a decent counter into things like Zacian, and an okay answer into Groudon and Sun teams, mainly being that Fire Dragon type, to deal with Venusaur really well. However, it fell off a lot in Series 10, down to just 1/3% at 0.33% here. It didn't offer a ton in a non-Dynamax format. A big chunk of what was wrong with the non-Dynamax format is ground types were very popular. Things like Earthquake was really good. You couldn't redirect hits away from Reshiram because everything was spread damage. So Reshiram really struggled in Series 10, but still had a lot to offer in terms of just overall utility and offense. It just didn't quite mesh up with the way Series 10 played out. And then Reshiram, like overall in a format, looks to try and find a place where Zacian, Groudon, Kyogre, and Calyrex dominate, mainly because it's usually bulky enough to deal with the Groudons and the Calyrex ices and things like that. It's neutral damage to water, so if you're like a Salt Vest Reshiram, you could probably tank a Water Spout and then maybe deal some decent damage back into Kyogre to make that Water Spout weaker on the next turn. Groudon, it's really good into the rest of the Sun team other than Groudon. Groudon can definitely deal with the Reshiram if it lines up correctly, but like Reshiram's real good into Venusaur, Reshiram's decent into Charizard and things like that. So it's interesting to see Reshiram try to find a niche into this meta where all of these big hitters like Zacian and Calyrex and things like that are very, very popular. Common partners for Reshiram tend to be kind of supporty offensive, I would call it. I wouldn't call it full offense or full support. They kind of ride that fine line of they still deal damage, but they have utility too. Think things like Rillaboom, Landorus, Regieleki. They all have some kind of utility moves, but they all can steal decent amounts of damage when called upon. Rillaboom's really good as it is a resisted hit for ground types. Landorus is even better as it is immune to ground type attacks. The one downside of Regieleki is you double up on that ground weakness. However, Regieleki gives you that speed control that Reshiram desperately wants in the form of Electro Web or other like weird speed moves like that. So you can easily use Regieleki to outspeed your opponent and make Reshiram shine, whereas Rillaboom and Landorus here kind of help facilitate its weaknesses and keep it safer a lot of the time. Some other common partners that we see alongside Reshiram are things like Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl provides screens, it helps you just survive hits. It again is another speed control option with either Scary Face or Thunder Wave, so it's kind of cool to have those options for Grimmsnarl on your team. Also notably, it's a good dragon switch-in, so it kind of just doubles as that role of I can be a protector and I can help make Reshiram better. Suicune is another really popular one alongside it, mainly because you get access to Tailwind. You're really bulky. You can help deal with the ground type weakness. You can help deal with some of the other weird weaknesses in there with your random coverage and things like that. Moves like Snarl help you out a ton. So it's cool to see that Reshiram isn't super duper oppressive enough to where it's I have to play all support or I have to play all defense. I get to play these weird pseudo supports and these weird pseudo offensive mons to kind of facilitate the game plan. When we look at the metagame breakdown here, we see that Earth Power is the most common move on Reshiram at 86%. Not surprised by this. Earth Power is very powerful on Dynamax Pokemon. Ground coverage in general is good on Dynamax Pokemon, giving you that special defense boost. Earth Power is even better because you have a harder time hitting certain types. Being a fire dragon type, you can't hit fairies really well, so having Earth Power means that you get to do a little bit more damage overall. Draco Meteor here, 81%. This is your main dragon stab attack. Not surprised to see that here. Blue Flare at 77%. This one's a little bit iffy because you have the accuracy issues and things like that, but it's also the strongest fire type attack you have access to, so play with it what you will. You take the risks if you want it. Risks versus rewards. It's probably going to pay off in the long run to have Blue Flare as your main attack. Me personally, I like being able to hit my attacks most of the time, so I will tend to gravitate towards Fusion Flare instead, being able to make sure we hit to that fire type attack a lot more often. Protect here at 71% though shows that the main sets are offensive Life Orb, which we see with the common items matches up pretty well. Earth Power, Draco Meteor, Fire Attack, Protect is super duper common, and that's what most Reshiram are doing right now. Other type coverage moves, you get things like Ancient Power or Solar Beam to kind of be in these weird, there's grass coverage and there's rock coverage. Like I mentioned earlier, you get Shadow Ball as well, which we have on a set later to help you deal with that, like that Calyrex Shadow matchup or that Calyrex Ice matchup if your fire attack isn't going to be good. Heat Wave here at 13% is the other fire move of choice, in my opinion, mainly due to the fact that you get to do spread damage versus single target, especially against like an opposing Sun team. If you're not like running safety goggles or anything like that, you can easily be redirected with an Amoonguss to hit it instead of hitting the opposing Pokemon that you need to, or just being put to sleep by Venusaur. When we look at the common items, like I mentioned, Life Orb here at 44%, we also see Assault Vest at 29%. This is interesting mainly due to the fact that you're already very specially bulky. I don't feel like you need the extra special bulk from Assault Vest, but it lets you put those EVs that you would put in special defense into other assets, like defense or your special attack and things like that, so it kind of makes sense here. Weakness policy is very interesting. I'm not sure exactly how we're activating a weakness policy on a Pokemon that's only weak to Dragon, Rock, and Ground. But if it works, it works. The best thing I can think of is like Bulldoze, but then you're lowering your speed, which is counterproductive. So I'm not sure exactly like you Dynamax and click Earthquake is probably the best move I can think of. And then Charcoal here at 5% just helps boost your fire type attacks, helps boost your Blue Flare, your Fusion Flare, your Heat Wave, whatever you end up playing. Super duper niche here is Safety Goggles. I'm a big proponent of putting Safety Goggles on your Restricteds. It didn't show up as a common item, but I would think about it every time you put a Restricted on your team that can Dynamax. Consider putting Safety Goggles on it. Venusaur is very popular. Amoonguss is very popular. I expect Volcarona to maybe stick around a little bit with Rage Powder stuff like that. So think about putting your Safety Goggles on your Restricted and maybe keeping you from having to work through some sleep turns from a Venusaur and things like that. When looking to build with Reshiram, it has big weaknesses to Rock, Ground, and Dragon, so making sure you have decent switch-ins for these types is very, very important. Think Landorus, or a fighting type like Urshifu, or even the Grimmsnarl or another fairy type to switch in on Dragon type attacks, or a Steel type. All of those are very good options to have on your Reshiram team to kind of help facilitate your Reshiram game plan. Make sure that you have good speed control as well. Reshiram isn't the fastest thing on the field. Base 90 means that you can struggle a little bit in this restricted format where everything's hitting 200 plus most of the time with either via Choice Scarf or just naturally like Regieleki, Zacian, or Calyrex Shadow. So having dedicated ways to outspeed your opponent is a good thing for you to have. And while Reshiram deals a ton of damage, it does need some help to carry the game on its own. That's why we see partners like Grimmsnarl. Indeedee was also on that list when I was looking through it. So screens and redirection are very, very beneficial for Reshiram to have, so you can avoid taking unnecessary damage or mitigating your damage taken overall. Looking at the base stats and movesets for Reshiram here, we see that its stats are fairly high across the board. Base 100 for HP and defense, base 120s for attack and special defense, base 150 for that special attack. You can definitely play like an offensive physical Reshiram if you want to. However, it's just feels suboptimal to be doing that, and just playing special attack is just the best thing to do. And like I mentioned, you have 90 base speed, which isn't terrible, but does leave a little bit desired when the format is reaching that 200 plus range, trying to outspeed Zacians and Calyrex Shadows and things like that. So having a good speed plan, whether that's investing speed plus Tailwind or doing Choice Scarf things with investment, something to get you into a decent speed tier to where you can actually compete with those Pokemon is a good thing to have. When we look at the first moveset here, we see that it's fairly standard. It's kind of bulky across the board. Using Life Orb, 100 special attack investment gets you a little bit of a bump. Not quite as much. Modest Nature adds to that bump power. We have Draco Meteor, Earth Power, Heat Wave, and Protect. This is probably one of my more standard sets, other than the Heat Wave. Heat Wave is just more of a personal preference. Being able to deal spread damage is probably better in this format than it was in Series 10. Mainly due to the fact that there's less wide guard running around. Just things to think about with that. As for the second set here, we see that Assault Vest gets access to moves like Shadow Ball, Ancient Power, or Solar Beam in that Protect slot. This set also carries Fusion Flare as its fire type attack instead of Blue Flare. Again, these are just personal preferences. You could probably get away with running Blue Flare. You just run the chance of missing your attack that way. Earth Power, Draco Meteor to round out the set here. Much more on the fast offensive side because we have that Assault Vest instead of worrying about being modest Life Orb. And as for this last set here, again, Safety Goggles, Earth Power, Fusion Flare, Draco Meteor, Protect. With that Safety Goggles, we don't have to run spread damage to try and pick up Venusaur or Amoonguss or things like that. So we can run Fusion Flare safely and not have to worry about being redirected into a Grass type or something like that. Again, this one also focuses on speed and special attack, a little bit less in bulk. Just trying to keep up with the rest of the format, pairing it with things like Regieleki for speed drops or Tailwind to get double speed and things like that are just good ideas when you're team building with Reshiram. When looking to defeat an opposing Reshiram, Reshiram can struggle when paired against screens or snap drops like Snarl and Eerie Impulse. Using these tools to your advantage is going to help you beat Reshiram in the long run. Like I mentioned, some Reshiram carry a weakness policy, so hitting that Reshiram for super effective damage, even in Dynamax, can usually spell disaster. So I would play like everything has weakness policy and use stat drops more than trying to just burst it out in one go. Beyond that, outspeeding that Reshiram is going to just save you miles in the long run. Means you get extra chip damage, means you get that extra Snarl, or you get that screens up in time, or you get that extra Eerie Impulse off with your P2 and things like that. Trying to use like Trick Room or Tailwind to outspeed an opposing Reshiram means a ton in the long run. And utilize some of the more tricky tools. And what I mean by that is using like Grimmsnarl or Whimsicott using Trick, because a lot of these Reshiram like to Dynamax. They don't necessarily Dynamax on turn 1, but tricking a lagging tail or tricking an eject button or removing that Dynamax from the game or making it move last to where you can reliably predict on what it's going to do can help you out a lot, especially if it's like Life Orb or Assault Vest. They're very reliant on having those items to survive hits and deal damage a lot of the time. So taking away that item it's actually really good for you as well. So to wrap up on Reshiram here, while boasting favorable matchups with some of the more popular restricteds like Zacian and Groudon, it hasn't seen a ton of play in Series 10. But the re-addition of Dynamax to Series 11 looks to help aid that. Officially being into Series 11 here, it's interesting to see what Reshiram can do in this renewed Series 8 format. It saw a lot of play early and kind of tapered off towards the end of Series 8. It'll be interesting to see if, with the rise of Sun teams early on in Series 11, if Reshiram starts to trend upwards in usage and things like that. And while it looks powerful on paper, the format can easily accommodate for it. Think Screens from Grimmsnarl, think Snarl from like Scarf Entei or Incineroar, Eerie Impulse from Prankster Thundurus, Porygon 2, all that sort of stuff. It's super easy to just fit that in on these teams for Dynamax for like Series 11, which led to its lower use in Series 8 and probably is going to lead to it not becoming a pillar of the format like some of the other restricteds do in Series 11. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for hanging out and listening to me ramble about Reshiram today. Make sure to check us out on Twitter at LRLessons, at Mr. Missouri25, and at MusicalVGC. Check out the Discord, link is in the description, or you can always go to discord.gg/LRLessons. Make sure to go check out our merch on the website at LRLessons. You'll have to go to merchandise and then click the link in the merchandise tab. It'll take you to our Teespring store where we have all of that stuff up there for you. And remember to subscribe, hit that like button, do all the fun YouTube stuff. It helps us out a lot, helps the algorithm send us out to new people and all that. And with that being said, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're at in the world, and we will see you all on Friday with Charizard. Bye, everyone.